you just tell us who you are.
Okay, I'm Manuel Atencia. I'm a student of the University of Navarra and studying in the sixth year of economics and law. We're going to do a presentation. See next.
My name is Inigo. I'm Spanish, and I study at the University of Navarra with them. We're all classmates at Pamplona. It's my 6th year of a double degree in law and economics.
My name is Cristina. I'm also from Spain, from Pamplona, and also I study with them law and economics.
My name is Caterina Munar. I am studying law and business. I am in my 6th year, and I am with them.
Perfect. Let's each get our timers.
That's for the 30 minutes, right?
Which is all your show.
So thank you very much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our presentation. Now, you do know us already. You hire us as consultants. You are Pepsi Board of Directors. Now, today we will be discussing an issue that you told us to discuss. Now, I'll start by telling you a little story. My grandmother passed away 1 month ago, but there's one conversation I do remember having with her just a couple of months before she died. And I went into her room, and it was really warm, and so she didn't have the sweater that she usually wears, and she had a really big scar on her left arm. It was the first time I saw her because she's always wearing long sleeves, and I asked her, "Grandma, what is that scar you are wearing? You have right there." It's the first time I see it, and I noticed that she didn't want to talk about it, so she answered, "It's the consequence of our decision." That's the only thing she said. So what I apply from that situation is that our decisions have consequences. The decision that you have to take today will have many consequences. Will have legal consequences, economic, and ethical consequences. Now, you are about to launch a great product. Pepsi Next is awesome. We tried it, and we really think it's a really good product. However, we do know that there's some ethical issues going on. Because for the investigations, you've hired a company, Genomics, that is using stem cells from human embryos. We are going to analyze those consequences.
Thank you, Nino. We will start with the legal perspective. In August 2010, your company entered into a 4-year agreement with Genomics, an American biotechnological company. And it was for the development of high-potency sweeteners. You paid to them $13 million.
After knowing about this agreement, an USA pro-life organization complained against it and promoted a boycott all along the states. The reason of this boycott was that Genomics uses aborted fetal cells that are called HEK293, which means human embryonic kidney cells. The answer you gave to them was that these cells were not finally included in the product Pepsi Next, and that you were going to continue with this agreement. And also you told them that this new product Pepsi was going to be healthier, so that's why you were going to continue with them.
1 month later, one of your shareholders, named Sarah Gilner, made a proposal requiring you to adopt a corporate policy that recognizes human rights and employs ethical standards which do not involve using the remains of aborted human beings in your development agreements. As you can see, this proposal was directly against your agreement with Genomics, and Sarah Gilner wanted this proposal to be presented and voted at a meeting of PepsiCo's shareholders.
On the 3rd of January 2012, your lawyers sent a letter to the SEC asking if you could exclude this proposal from your 2012 proxy material according to Rule 1488 that we further analyze afterwards.
On the 22nd of February of 2012, you took a precautionary measure. A letter was sent to your shareholders requiring them to vote against the proposal in case it was finally included in the proxy materials.
Today, 26th of February, we are waiting for the answer of the SEC. As you know, one of the missions of the SEC consists on protecting investors, but trying to make it as compatible as possible with the objectives of the companies. If the SEC decides that you have to include this proposal on your proxy materials and you don't do it, then they can recommend enforcement action against you. So that is why you have to be careful and listen to the answer of the SEC.
We have studied the rules of the SEC. The important one in our case is the Rule 14. And according to it, Sarah Gilner, the shareholder who made the proposal, has complied all the procedural requirements to submit it. But this rule also contains some bases on which a company may rely to exclude a proposal from its proxy materials.
According to this basis, we think and we predict that the SEC is going to allow you to exclude the proposal from your proxy materials. And you could do it if you argue that this proposal deals with a matter related with the ordinary business operation of the company. And in fact, this rule is very understandable because shareholders should not give their opinion in all the matters of the company. If they could do it, the company will be ungovernable.
Now you have to take a decision whether to include or not to include the proposal in the proxy materials. If you do it, your shareholders will be able to vote in favor or against Sarah Gilner's proposal. But if you don't do it, your shareholders won't vote. And you should take into consideration two aspects. First of all, do you really think that this issue is an ordinary business activity? If you think so, no, if you don't think so, if you don't think that this is an ordinary business activity because this ethical issue goes beyond what an ordinary business activity is, so include the proposal in the proxy materials. But if you don't agree with that, I would like you to consider a second question. Is your shareholders' conscience sufficiently protected?
To answer for this question, we think that you have to think that what Sarah Gilner was looking forward with this proposal was to act according with her conscience and according with what she thinks about abortion. As you know, abortion is a very controversial issue in the United States. The Supreme Court, for example, has dealt with this debate in many cases. For example, we can think about Roe versus Wade case. And also, regulation in the States is very different. However, all these laws have in common the protection of human life. The discussion relies on the limits of this protection. So, because of this controversial issue, we think that you should not suppose that all the shareholders think the same way as you do. And that is why we recommend you to include the proposal in order to listen to your shareholders and try to protect their conscience. So it is up to you. Knowing that whatever the decision you take, you will act according to the law. How important is for you, your shareholders' conscience and your shareholders' ethical concerns?
After having analyzed the legal perspective, let's see the economic one.
Now, before we actually take a look at the economic, let's see a little bit more what HAK cells are. Because not a lot of people do know what they are. Now, these cells are stem cells. Now, as you probably know, there's two types of stem cells. There's the embryonic stem cells, which were used starting in the 1970s, and now there's the adult stem cells. The big difference is that embryonic have to be taken from fetus, and the adults are found in any adult. Like any one of us has those adult stem cells. Now, how the process works is that this HAK293 cells are used mainly in three industries: the pharmaceutical industry, cosmetic, and beverages industry. Now, of course, we're going to center our attention to the beverages industry because this is the one that applies to us, Pepsi. Now, this cell is used mainly for two things: FDA control and flavor enhancement. So whenever you want a new product on the market, what you have to do is you have, let's say, chemical components that are not usual or new. So what you need to test those components in order for them not to be, let's say, give cancer or something like that. So you need to test them. Now, you need to test them with those cells. So that's what they're used for. You test if they can provoke cancer by putting it together with that cell. Now, the important thing here is that, this is just an illustration of saying, right here in the pluripotent, you can see those are the embryonic cells, right here. And this would be the other stem cells. These would be the adult stem cells that are found in any one of us. These are just found on embryos. Now, let's look at an easier drawing. This would be an embryo stem cells, which divide themselves once you grow up and you're born into these types of cells, the orange ones, which are adult stem cells. Now, there's just one type of these stem cells, which would be the HAK, and there's 20 types of adult stem cells. Now, the big difference between both is that in order to have the same experiment done, you only need one of these stem cells, which is very, very cheap. And to have the same experiment done, you need 20 of these cells. What's the problem? This one is really easy to get. It's really cheap, it's in the market. It comes from an abortion, true, but it's very cheap. This one is really hard to get because you need adults and you need to have medical intervention. So that's the big difference. This one we could say is unethical. This one is ethical, but it's a lot more expensive.
So now it's time to analyze the economic consequences, the economic impact of the moral decisions. So we're going to analyze this fact looking in the short run and then in the long run. Firstly, in the short run, as Inigo said, PepsiCo has an agreement with Xenomics. As also Inigo said, Xenomics is using the HEK 293 cells for all the investigation in order to enhance the flavor of Pepsi. His principal competitor, Coca-Cola, has, I think, that they have an agreement with Chromosol. The thing is, like, Xenomics are using the HEK salts, and it's cheaper for them to investigate with it. The agreement with PepsiCo is just $30 million. We have done an estimation of the cost of the agreement between Coca-Cola and Chromosol. For sure that you know better than us, but but we think that the cost of this agreement is around $40 million. So the conclusion is that in the short run, to be ethic represents a loss of $10 million.
That other company does not use.
Yeah, if you use,
They do use stem cells, but they use adult stem cells.
Yeah.
So it's not the ones that come from embryos, but from actual adults.
Okay, that's where the cost increase.
And that's the cost increase. That's right.
Yeah. So this is the conclusion. If you are ethic in the short run, you will lose around $10 million. So now it's time to analyze what will happen in the long run. So,
of course, as you probably know, ethical decisions do not only have short-run impacts, but mostly long-run impact is more important. Now, the big problem with the long-run decisions is that you cannot know what the long-run decision, or economic decision, what the economic consequences are going to be. Why? Because you cannot do two things at the same time. You cannot launch a product and not launch it at the same time. So in order to do that, you have to estimate. You have to see what do we think would happen, and what does the market think that would happen. So those are the 2 points right there. What would we think that would happen depending on different scenarios, and what does the market think that would happen. Now let's take first a look at the estimation. Now there's 3 possible scenarios that we would look at. The first scenario would be saying yes to HAK. Say we will continue with this path and we're going to use this cell. The second would be let's say no. Let's take a decision and say no to the use of these cells. And the third possibility would be say no to these cells, but say 2 years from now, let's say. Not straight away, but 2 years from now. Now the consequences that will arise from any of these scenarios are very, very different. Let's take a look at the first scenario first. Now, if we actually say yes, we are going to keep using these stem cells, the first consequence is that we're going to have Pepsi next on the market. using this sales, everyone's gonna love it. We're gonna have a huge market share increase. That's probably gonna be a very good thing for us. Now, we do know that there's a lot of associations pro-life in the United States and a lot of places in Europe and in Australia where Pepsi Next is being launched that will start boycott against us. And not only against Pepsi Next, but for the whole Pepsi brand. Now, the third problem would be that we have a lot of partners that have a code of conduct that do not permit the use of stem cells. So let's say Burger King, for example, in many places has an agreement with Pepsi. And in the code of conduct, as they say, they do not research with the cells, they might break the agreement with us because we do. So that might be a real huge risk. The gains from using Pepsi Next, it wouldn't be that big. It wouldn't be that big for the reason that the board of directors consider that only 1% of market share is really a big achievement for Pepsi Next. Now, out of that market, the big market in the United States, this would be the best case scenario, 1%. And that's not that much money if you compare it to the losses from the boycott in the whole world. Now, there's two possibilities. The best case scenario is the boycott only affects the Pepsi brands, which are the ones located here, Mountain Dew, Pepsi, or other brands. For example, I'll just say Quaker or Tropicana, which are PepsiCo's brand. Now, probably when the boycott starts, it will only affect Pepsi, but at the end of the day, it might start affecting other brands, the PepsiCo. Now, the other problem we have is the partnerships all around the world. Now, these partnerships it's funny because it's not worldwide partnerships, but in every country they have different partners. Now, we just took an example just to see how much revenue comes from those partners. And we saw in Spain, 27% of Pepsi's revenue in Spain comes from partnerships. Let's say, for example, you go to Burger King, you order your meal, you have a Pepsi. That's how it works. Well, 27% is really big, and we might lose that 27% if we continue this path. Another risk would be that a lot of the marketing that we do is on television, and a lot of TV channels will not advertise a product when it's being researched with stem cells. And we know that for a fact because it's in their code of conduct already. Now, because of the reasons, we believe that taking this path would be really not a good idea. We would lose a lot of money in the long run. Now, let's take a look at the second scenario. The second scenario would be pretty much the same as the one we just saw, but we will not be losing from a boycott because we're saying we're not using stem cells anymore. So we shouldn't have boycott going on. And we will not lose any partners because we're not doing the boycott anymore. But we can still launch the product. Why? Because not a lot of people know about this yet. So if we do fall back for a second, we will be able to launch Pepsi Next. The other way, if we say a late no to Pepsi Next, what might happen is that we might not be able to launch Pepsi Next. If we keep researching with stem cells, in probably 2 or 3 years' time, we say, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. We'll probably have to take Pepsi Next out of the market. The product is already identified with stem cells. Now, that comes along with an image damage. Now, we know there's a lot of cases, like say Fendos, Zara, or Adidas. What's happened to them is that they've had, their brand image has really gone down because of ethical issues. Now, that's a real big risk. It's really hard to measure, but we do know that it is a big risk. Now, because of the reason, we believe that the worst thing we can do, and that's why we assigned it a red color, would be to continue to investigate with these cells. The best thing we could do is say no to these cells right now. And the middle point, the point in between, would be a late no to the HAK cells. Now for the market perception.
So the other aspect to consider in order to know what will be the economic consequences of the moral decisions is market perception. So you can ask every investor or the investor in the market, or just see how the stock price performed in a company that has adopted an immoral decision. So we have many examples of companies that has suffered crashed in their market because of an immoral decision. And in addition to there are many representative investors like George Soros, Menq, or here we have the CEO of the Body Shop that says all the time that later or soon, if you are not an ethical company, you will go down your stock. And also, in conclusion, in the long run, because of the estimations we have done and because of the market perception we have analyzed, we could say that to be ethical in the long run is a good business. And finally, we have analyzed the short run and the long run. We said that in the short run you will lose around $10 million. But what is $10 million for a company like Pepsi? And also, in the long run, we have also analyzed that the revenues will be higher than the losses that you will have in the short run. So this is our conclusion of the economic perspective, and now we're going to analyze the ethical perspective.
Now, I started talking about my grandmother, and the story actually continues. That day, I went back home, took the bus home, and I found my dad. He was working. He said, "Dad, can I talk to you?" I said, "Of course." I sat down and I said, "Dad, I saw Grandma has this scar on her arm. How did she do that?" And here's the funny story that he told me. Like when my grandmother was 20 years old, Spain was in a huge war, civil war. Her parents were away. His parent was a soldier. His dad was a soldier, and his mom was away. So she was alone home. And one day, walking back home, she found a man on the street that was about to die. It was an enemy soldier. It was on the other side. It was an enemy. It was about to die. And she didn't finish the nursing school because of the war, but she had some knowledge of nursing. So she actually picked it up. She picked him up, brought him home, and he had him for a few weeks. When he healed, one morning, she did not realize that he woke up and he almost killed her. Now you might think this is impressive. She helped him. She saved his life. And one day, in the middle of the night, he woke up, stole everything, and tried to kill my grandma. Now the scar she had, she made it when she ran away from home. Because she fell, there was real big stairs and she fell, and that's why she had this scar. Now, when you probably realize when my dad told me the story, the next day I went to my grandmother and said, "Grandma, like, how did you do that? Like, you knew the consequences. You knew that this was gonna happen. He was an enemy soldier. You should have taken precaution." I said, "How do you decide when something's good or wrong?" And she said, "I decided to save this man's life because of what we are, not because of who we are. And we are human people, and as such, we need to do good because of what's good, and not wrong because it's wrong." She said, "I saved his life because it made me a better person." Now we think that's what we have to do here, considering the ethical part. We need to do what we believe is going to make us and Pepsi a better brand.
Okay, so in your life, in your everyday, you face many different situations. If you're walking in the street, you have to choose between going on the left or going in the right side. Or if you are going out, you have to decide between wearing a certain t-shirt or the other one. This kind of actions has no important consequences in your life. On the other hand, we find certain decisions that are significant for you as a person. Decisions that make you better or worse, make you be proud of yourself or not. If you choose to wear the red t-shirt instead of the black one, your life will not change. However, if you choose to lie, you change. You become a liar. If you steal something, you become a thief. And in addition to, if you do one of these bad actions once, you get used to it, and you think that it is not as a reprehensible behavior as it was before. We are here to alert you that the decision that you are going to take is a decision of the second type, a decision that can make you better or worse, a decision that affects you as a person.
The decision that we think you have to make consists on whether to continue or not with the Xenomics agreement. So why do we say that it belongs to the second group of decision? So we think that because of Xenomics research using ATK cells and because of the use of aborted fetus cells, we think that human life is the key issue of this decision. And the decision you will take is related with human life. That is why we think that this belongs to the second group.
So what is the origin of the HEK293 cell? It comes from an abortion that occurred in 1972 in Netherlands, a unique abortion. But what kind of abortion was this one? Was an induced one or was an spontaneous one? It is difficult to determine it, but given that the fetus has to be large enough to use its kidney, and it is very, very difficult to plan an spontaneous abortion, it seems that the tissues have to come from an induced abortion. In fact, there is a document in the FDA webpage that recognizes that conclusion, that it is an induced abortion where humans took part of it.
Okay, so maybe you're wondering why we are talking about an abortion that occurred in 1972 and what is your relationship with that abortion. We are going to show you that you have a very close relationship with this abortion. So for this reason, your actuation is not ethically correct. So the thing is, for seeing it graphically, we are going to establish all the agents involved in the action in a line. As you know, the HEK293 cells were obtained because of an induced abortion in 1972. Then these cells were divided by themselves, and then later Xenomics bought a few of these cells. And later you made an agreement with them. So Xenomics is using for investigation this type of cells, and you are using the benefits of these researchers. So the thing is, that's true that in a murder, the killer has not the same responsibility as the one who ordered that action. So in our case, it's the same. All the agents doesn't have the same responsibility. We are going to develop a more simple example to assign the different grades of responsibility of each agent.
Albert Einstein said that before you actually understand a very complex problem, you need to understand a simple problem first, and then you can understand the other one. If we have something in common here, is that we've all been students. So let's put an example regarding exams. Let's say you're teachers, or let's say you are the principal of a school, and you find someone, let's put Manuel, for example, Manolo, stealing an exam. He went to the teacher's office and stole the exam. But let's now say that Christina paid him in order to get that exam. Which one would be the actual thief? Christina, who's paid for the exam, or Manolo, who's actually taken? Now let's put a third agent in the equation. Let's have Caterina. Let's say Caterina is a friend of Christina, and she knows the questions that are going to be asked in the exam, but she doesn't say anything. What are their responsibility? She knows, they all know the questions, but he's stolen the exam, but she's paid for it. Now we believe that the answer to these questions are exactly the same answers to the Xenomics and Pepsi agreement.
Talking in a more technical way, we can say that Manolo is the executor of the first bad action, the act of stealing the exam. I think that we all agree that he's acting in an immoral way. Now Christina is paying for getting the exam. She is cooperating with Manolo, and she is sharing his evil intention. She is a formal cooperator. And I feel that she is acting as well in an immoral behavior. Now me, I am receiving the questions of the exam. So I don't care about how Christina got the exam. I don't share her evil intention. I am just taking some benefits from the outcomes of Christina's action. This is called evil appropriation.
Okay, so this example, we think that simplifies our case. my role in the fictitious case is the same role as the doctor has in our case. I stole the exam. The doctor made the abortion. So we could conclude that the doctor is the executor in our case. Secondly, we find xenomics, that this we could compare xenomics with the action of Cristina, because it's like they are paying to the doctor to do the abortion. And thirdly, we find Ibecc company that this xenomics will be the formal cooperator, and you, in the third position, you will be the one that use the benefits from the investigation of xenomics, as the same that Katerina did in the fictitious example. So the thing is, if in the example below you thought about punishing the 3 actors involved in the other example, don't you think you should wonder about your involvement in this controversial issue? Don't you think you should change your agreement with xenomics?
Just 15 seconds to conclude. We realized that legally it'd be good to include the proposal. Economically, we think that although in the short run it's not good for us because we might lose $10 million, in the long run it's by far the best option. And ethically, we believe that the best thing to do is to break the agreement with xenomics if they continue to research with these cells. Why? Because we believe that is wrong, and that we are appropriating their evil, and thus, like in the example of the exam, we are doing just as wrong as they are doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now we'll move to 20 minutes of questions. Can we get the timer, Karen? Thanks very much. Who would like to start?
I'd like to ask you a question about just on the ethics. What are you trying to say is your total message about ethics? Because we're talking about contamination. People are fearing the type of cells they're going to be used, and the fact that they're going to be using so contaminating the formula that's going to be prepared. And the fear, and you're trying to reassure people that there's a product that's going to be safe. It's also going to be one that's good for our children. We're going to be good parents if we have good values. And what is your major message that you're trying to get across with your ethical proposal that's being put in with the finance and the legal implications here?
Okay, we are following a theory, or we are trying to transmit a message that is that your decisions make you better or worse. That is called virtue ethics theory. We know that there exist another theories or point of view, such as deontological ethics or utilitarianism. For example, if we follow utilitarianism, we could say that this action is good because if with person we can make a research and obtain a medicine that we could save hundreds or thousands of lives, then it's a good action. But we don't agree with this theory, because we think that human life is not measurable as a pen or a bottle or a thing, we say. So I think that the message we want to transmit is that human life is not measurable, and that your decisions make you better or worse. I don't know if my mates agree or...
I've got a quick mathematical question about the cost of the short-term decision. You said it would be $10 million.
Yeah.
How did you come up with that again? You just took the difference between what they're paying out versus what us...
Now, our recommendation would be to break the agreement with xenomics.
Are they able to do that?
The agreement is 5-year term. 4 years. 4 years. Thank you very much. 4 years. Now, they've assured us already that if we want them to use another procedure, we could do that. Another procedure that doesn't use the stem cells, they could do that for the following term. Now we believe that after those 4 years, we would start hiring someone else that does not use those HLK cells. So the short run cost would be the one from shifting from one to another.
Within the same company?
Within the same company, of course.
Okay.
Of course.
Okay. And then a quick follow-on question on a different angle. Assuming that we agree to go with your recommendation of the quick adoption of the shareholder decision, what would you say are the ethical considerations that we should keep in mind about marketing our decision and capitalizing on the reasons for the decision to adopt shareholders proposals? Do you think we should be quiet about it and just do it because it's the right thing, or do you think it would be ethically acceptable to profit from and do a little flag waving about the fact that we've made this big formal stance?
Sorry,
Can we have this few seconds?
Sure.
Today, that is 26, I will not make marketing because of that, because 4 days before, we have recommended our shareholders to vote against. So maybe 5 days before, I will make it public, but now it's like we're contradicting.
We're being contradicted.
With ourselves, because 4 days before we said please vote against, and now like make public that we include the proposal. So being coherent. See?
So even 1 year from
Sorry?
1 year from now?
1 year from now? Yeah, I will do it.
I think we'd have to study that a little bit more. But of course, it'd be a really interesting question to address.
Any other questions?
Just one question, something that wasn't particularly clear. So with your 3 scenarios, and the green was at the early no. Under that, do you still believe that we would be able to continue to sell the product? I think you had mentioned that at one point. And what's the worst case scenario is that at this point in time, taking a step back, would that have actually worked? And what would have been kind of you weighed opposite ends of that? What if that didn't work? How did you advise us or thought through that process?
Now, there's 2 ways to answer this question. One way would be the official way, which would be we're in February, 26th of February, which would be, in this case, we would say that we really believe, because that's how the marketing shows, that the boycott is not big enough to retrieve the product. So the boycott right now, when a boycott starts, it grows really, really slowly, and then comes a point in which it starts being exponential. Right now, we're at the point where there's only one representative of the boycott, and we can actually contact them and stop the boycott right away. And we believe that's possible. Now, on the, let's say the under table answer would be that that's actually what happened. They actually contacted them. They said, we're not going to do this, and the boycott just stopped. And Pepsi Next now is in the market and it's doing great.
What hurdle do you think is the biggest to overcome, to convince in the situation you've presented? The recommendations that you have. What, as you have been developing this and anticipating the board's reaction, what did you consider the biggest hurdle in the board's agreeing with this? What did you consider the biggest obstacle you'd have to overcome to get our support?
Can I have a second, please?
Absolutely.
I think that the big issue is abortion, because it's a really controversial issue nowadays in USA, around the world, Spain, around the world. So I think that the first and biggest obstacle with the board of directors was this one, and to transmit the virtue ethics related to this issue. What do you think?
I totally agree with that view. Like, when we're presenting to the board, we could divide the board into two big groups: pro-life and pro-choice, just like anyone in society. Now, those who are pro-choice are going to be, doesn't really matter. Like, I could have any abortions, that's not life. So those people would be hard to convince with the presentation we just made. Now, for the pro-life, some would say that was an abortion that happened 40 years ago. Why cannot we benefit? It's already done. There's nothing we can do. So I think the biggest, I think with this presentation we can convince those who are pro-life and to figure out that wait, this is the correct way of going. But for those who are pro-choice, we would have to go deeper and actually start talking about if when abortion is good or it's wrong.
I had a question about, you spoke about various partners that may have a code of conduct that is against working with groups that use the HEK cells. So are you telling me in our code of conduct, Pepsi, we do not have any provision that says we shouldn't be working with these cells? So it's allowable business practice use.
It just doesn't say right now. It just doesn't.
Then why isn't one of your recommendations to me that we include that in our code of conduct? Because I think that's a short-term win with a long-term benefit. That if this is an issue that we need to address, then we need to address it in our code as well.
In fact, that's exactly what was done. Like when we say that we want to break up with Tsunomics, of course that would have to have a public, let's say public, like you have to explain why. And when you explain why, it has to have a reflection of your code of conduct. I think, of course, that would be perfectly fine, and we would totally agree with that.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we giving commentary?
We have,
You know, I think that'd be a good idea. It would be consistent. It would be transparent. I don't have chocolate after lunch, but no good. That would be bribery. I couldn't have accepted it. Please forgive me. Who'd like to start?
So I'm blown away by your presentation. I think this was amazing. So great job. A couple of things I loved were the three, here are the three options. And the yes, the early no, and the late no. And then all the, the backup behind what the ramifications of each option would be. That really spelled it out for me there. I can make a clear decision based on those facts. And I mean, ethics is a hard subject, right? It's very, you don't know what your audience thinks or where they're coming from. So what I appreciated is you, to really be convincing in your argument, you have to take a stance, and you took a stance, and it was really backed up with conviction, and you based it on a specific theory, which you explained. Mm-hmm. So I understood whether or not I necessarily agreed with your final, answer, which I actually did. I understood how you came to that conclusion. So thank you, great job.
I appreciated how you handed off to each other. It kept it engaging, and you walked us well through your slides, made your points well, and kept us following each of you. So I didn't feel like one person was doing the presentation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I enjoyed it for the same reason. There was one slide where you went off the scenario with the test failing, and then each part and kind of the label you gave to the person in that moment, and Pepsi fell into the example of the evil, what was it? Appropriation. I would be careful with my use of language if you were delivering that to the board, because if you were sitting there calling me evil, I might at that moment turn off and say, excuse me, there's the door. So I think just being more aware of your language and how it's delivered, I think overall it was very clear, and you presented three options, and I think in this you really you have to make the board or the individual own the decision. And you really said, you have to own it, and you're gonna have to walk this walk. And you presented, I guess, all the positives and the pitfalls to owning that decision. And I think as a board member, I would want to be informed in that way, so I can make decisions.
I was very impressed, and in the back of my mind, I kept thinking about the story. It's very important to make effective use of language, but also images. And I kept thinking of the grandmother. I hope she was her grandmother, and it was real. And I thought that she was real. Good. Okay. But I thought that was a good way to tell a story of what ethics is all about in a business context of good versus bad, and give us an illustration so we can. I kept thinking about the T-shirts and about the comment that you can change a T-shirt and it doesn't matter. But if you tell a lie, you have another label. And so good and bad, I mean the value systems. So I thought the way that you conveyed something which we in the United States call soft language, soft ideas versus a hard. A dollar amount is a hard figure you can catch on to. Other things are not. So I thought it was very well done in that way. The only suggestion I would make in the presentation, if you go forward at this point, is that in the very beginning, to bring us back to that time at the very beginning, so that we're not trying to remember, oh yeah, we're talking about a year ago, by the simple statement up front that let us go back to the dates and give us a date before February 26th, because we know that happened. This would be very helpful in setting up the fact that you are renegotiating in a different time.
I would just add, I completely echo what everybody has shared. I thought you guys did a great job of presenting. I'm a big fan of slides that you can speak to, but you're not reading off of. And I really like the visual aids. I mean, even when I asked my question, what I remember was the green that was in the middle. And so I think that was a really great visual representation of helping focus us on what your suggestion is. One of the other things is the storytelling. I thought that was great. Sitting as a board member, and if I truly was a board member, a lot of times you're really thinking business first and what's the best for this organization. And it is very difficult to bring ethics into that. And so that made you take a step back and change the context of the discussion a little bit. So I thought that was really well done as well. So overall, really good job. The only thing, constructive criticism, when you mentioned Zara and Adidas, and did say it was very difficult to quantify the impacts of their image and reputational issues. It might have been just a little bit more development would have been good from a business perspective in my mind, but I thought it was well taken, the point was well taken. So, good job.
I think that you have each a presence that was very relaxed, and you're dealing with a potentially heated, controversial subject, as you pointed out. So I thought it was particularly effective that you stayed away from the politics, which is a difficult thing to do and made it hard for the politics to enter into the discussion. And I think your demeanor was either deliberately or just naturally extremely calm, which also makes it easier for people to focus on the issue. You seemed passionate about Pepsi doing the right thing for its own sake, but not passionate about things that could get in the way of your credibility. So I think that was a really hard line for anyone to walk, and I think you did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Anything else that we should suggest before they go into their 10-minute or their 90-second? The story isn't likely to be part of the 90-second. Right?
90 seconds is not long enough.
It's a scratch, not hurt. Anything else? Good luck.
Okay.
Thank you.
And now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very
Great.
much.
Great job.
Really well done.
Thank you.
Thank you for the suggestions.
Thank you.